In the book, one of my core drivers was to make people know that they're not alone, and there are a lot of people that feel like this. So I think overwhelm is one of the most common words that entrepreneurs will use when they get together in their safe circles, because there's so many things to do, so many needs, and so little resources. So how are you going to do that? There's 4 main pillars. It's about execution, your support system, adapting, and perseverance. And one of the things in early feedback is, because it's a business book, but then there's also this mindset, almost like self-help element. And typically those are 2 different kinds of books. But I think the mindset aspect is so important in how you execute and how you adapt and how you persevere and how you think about support, that it is critical. So a lot of in that overwhelm is relying on those voices that you have and the mindset to adjust, but then also your processes. So you almost become robotic. Well, this is what I do next, because I know these are my top 3 actions for this week. So I'm going to go do that.
In a corporate world where all employees have great leaders with no egos that create fun cultures where people can do their best work, the employees and companies thrive while doing great things for the customers, themselves, and each other.
Well, we know that rarely happens. I'm Jeff Palacio. I have been a leader for over 40 years for every t-shirt size company, from small 16 employees to extra large over 1 million. Please join me while I interview outstanding leaders that will share stories of great leadership and not so great. It will help you become a better leader while poking fun about all the crazy shit that happens in corporate America.
Hi, I'm Joe Deshawn, and welcome to the Corporate Couch with Jeff Palacio. Today's episode is brought to you by Exec HQ, a C-suite fractional firm providing elite executives for your business. Today, Jeff is interviewing Maria Flynn. Maria is the founder and CEO of Ambiologics, a consulting and training company that helps entrepreneurs advance their innovation, grow their potential, and build their businesses. She is also the author of a new book, Make Opportunity Happen. As CEO of Orbis Biosciences, Maria built a technology company that improved pharmaceutical manufacturing, won awards for its novel innovation, and was acquired by Adair Pharmaceuticals. You can learn more about Maria at ambiologics.com. Let's listen as Jeff talks to Maria.
Maria, welcome to the Corporate Couch today.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
Yeah, no, I'm very excited. We got introduced by a Kansas City legend, one of the greatest people in Kansas City, Dr. Michelle Robin. So we had coffee back in March of 23, and I've been chasing you since then to get on the podcast. So thank you for coming on.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, it's going to be fun. Yeah, excited. You've done so many things, and excited to talk about your entrepreneurial journey and how you're helping other entrepreneurs. But let's start with a fun question. People that know you even fairly well, Maria, what would surprise them about you?
Well, this is not too surprising because I know you'll go into my background, and I'm a farm kid, but I do like to get out and get dirty and garden. And so it's a great kind of release to be in nature. And so I guess what's surprising is I just don't talk about that, but you'll see me pretty sweaty around my backyard.
There we go. I like that. Roll up the sleeves. It's like a typical entrepreneur. You got to do everything. You can't just sit in the ivory tower, right? You got to get down and dirty.
And I think my neighbors, when they drive by, I think, shouldn't you hire somebody to do that? But it's nice to be able to get out there and be one with nature.
Yeah, it's meditative too, right? It's good. You probably get some great ideas while you're doing that because you're kind of in the flow, right? Yeah. So I grew up in a wheat farm in Kansas, right? What was fun for you growing up? What did you love doing?
Oh, well, I love my family, and when you grow up on a farm, you're pretty tight knit because you have to coordinate things with friends. It's in 2 Saturdays we'll have Jody over. So what that leads to is really tight bonds with your family and game nights, and we have family nights where we'd show old pictures. My dad was a big photographer.
Oh, wow.
Um, and one of the things that's fun in that is, the pictures that you're in are always so much more interesting than others. And
Yeah.
I see that, and it's just kind of human nature. When people see themselves in things and they can relate to it, they're just so much more attracted to it. And so in writing the book, some of those elements of how do you help people see themselves in it um, was a strong thing that I thought about.
Yeah, I love that. Uh, as we were talking before I pressed the record button, we just became grandparents, and my cousin, I grew up in New York, and one of my cousins sent a gift for Scotty, my granddaughter now, and in it she had a picture from me, probably from college. And on the back, she goes, "Oh, my handsome cousin." I'm like, "Oh my God, no wonder I had no girlfriends." I mean, I'm like, "Oh, that hair, incredible." But yeah, pictures tell a lot. I did burn that picture. No, I'm kidding. Yeah. So what games were fun for you on game night?
Well, now my family, we're big into Catan. Yesterday we were outside. They had made a little mini golf course in the yard. So
Nice,
whatever we can find.
nice, nice. And then you stayed in Kansas and go to the K-State, the Wildcats. So you graduated civil engineering major. Was that your initial major that you did all 4 years? A lot of people will switch at least once.
I stayed in engineering, but I came in as general, kind of trying to figure out
Okay.
um, what I wanted to do because I knew it was going to be a launch pad, not the career I was going to do forever. So I looked at a couple of industries that civil drew me in because of the environmental aspects. I explored environmental, biomedical, and architectural. And then interesting how my career played out. Biomedical probably would have been a better choice. But when I think back to those days, it really taught me how to think and how to jump into things and learn quickly. One class you're learning about concrete and rebar, and the next one you're learning about wastewater. So I really value the path, but it was not clear of, yes, I want to be an environmental engineer for the rest of my life. It was just my first step on my journey.
So, as a child, did you have any aspirations? Like, when I'm an adult, I'm going to be this. What was this for you, Maria?
Yes, I was going to be a dancer because that's where
Oh,
I spent a lot of my time.
yeah.
But I come from pretty practical stock, and they knew, my lifespan was hopefully going to be longer than a typical dancer's lifespan, and how to, pay for things.
Yeah.
So my dad, as an architect, an architectural engineer always had to approve his drawings, and so he saw, the power that engineers had, and so he encouraged us to look at that as a possibility. And one of my brothers and I chose the engineering path.
So, at 18, 19, 20, you knew like civil engineering wasn't going to be your long-term plan? Or, I mean, how did you have that self-awareness at, such a young age, really?
So I saw my parents with their enterprises, and so growing up as part of their businesses, I knew that that was a path I was going to lead a business someday. And we didn't use the word entrepreneur back then. So I went into an advisor when I was about a year into engineering, the general engineering program, and you needed to choose which path you were going to take, which discipline. I said, well, I'm going to get an engineering degree, and then I'm going to get an MBA, and I'm going to run something. And she said, well, there's an easier path to an MBA than engineering. And then I took that in, but I really knew I wanted to do engineering as my foundation, as my base, because I knew it would teach me how to think and problem solve. And that turned to be true. But I really liked where business and technology intersected. And that's where I knew I would need to go get different experiences to be able to play in that space, which is where the MBA helped open up different opportunities that I could go do.
Yeah, that's amazing. Studies show that your brain doesn't fully develop till you're 25, and I would say males are probably later than that. So, I was just going to college for two things. I'm going to have the best GPA I can get, as high as possible, and I'm going to have fun. I accomplished that, but I was just saying, I just want a job.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
So did you go right from K-State to go to get your MBA? Because I also see you have a master's in science and environmental engineering from Stanford. So very
That's right.
impressive. Yeah,
So, and in those years, environmental engineering wasn't as prominent. It wasn't as its own field. It was tucked under civil engineering at K-State. So to really get the background that I needed to get the master's, and Stanford offered a 1-year program, which was great because then I could get it and move on and have the experience of Stanford, which was wonderful. Um, but since I knew I wanted to do different things in my career, I didn't want to stay too long on step one. Everything you do is a stepping stone to the next thing. And so Stanford differentiated me a little bit, but being from Kansas differentiated me going into Stanford. I came back to Kansas City to work as an engineer for 3 years, which is the minimum amount that an MBA program wants you to have. And then it is also the minimum number of years that you need to be a professional engineer, so that I had a backup plan. If these other ideas that I have don't work out, I could always come back and be an engineer.
so I mean, again, at a young age, you're like, okay, this I'm gonna do this, this, and this because my end game, career wise, not my end game, but where I want to end up, I want to run a company. Like, where did you get that type of kind of vision? I'll say, especially at that young age. Like, what prompted you to say, I'm gonna run my own company?
That's where mentors are so important. So my parents, I could see what they were doing, and they have that phrase, if you can see it, you can be it. So I had the advantage of being the youngest in my family, see my parents as great role models, see and learn from my brothers. So my oldest brother went engineering, and then he got an MBA later, and he's done business development in the energy space. So I could see what they were doing and say, yeah, I want to do that too, which is why it's so important to have diversity in all the roles so people can see people like them and take these paths and know that these are opportunities they can go do.
How did you get your first job when you left Stanford? I mean, it seemed like you worked for CDM Smith. It looked like how did that all transpire?
There was the internet at that time, but it was not as prevalent. So I went to the library and looked up, in the phone book, who are the engineering firms in Kansas City, and made a list of, and obviously Black and Veatch and Burns and Mac were very well known,
Sure.
but made a list of 10 or 12 and wrote letters. And then when I came for spring break, I interviewed with 5 or 6 that had replied back to me. So yeah, I feel very fortunate. It's always easier to find what you're looking for when you put a circle around, a geography or a specific industry. So the fact that I knew I wanted to come back to Kansas City helped me focus and find a place that was a good fit for me.
Yeah, that's great advice. So then you go to probably during the go-go years of a great Kansas City firm, especially when you were there, Cerner. How did you move on from CDM Smith to Cerner?
So then I went to get my MBA in Chicago in between those two.
Okay.
And so that opened up, different paths that I could follow. And luckily, Cerner was one of the companies that interviewed at Chicago. And it was a good time for them. They were really growing. So I got to come be part of that journey.
Looking at your LinkedIn, I mean, you started as a business strategist doing pricing models. So, you obviously had the analytical and quantitative skills, but then you look like you got promoted into a business director role, a business development role. So you're in sales for the first time, and then run a $5 million P&L, and it looked like you were there less than 5 years. So talk about your Cerner experience.
They had a great program. They did a great job of training the people that they brought in. They attracted really stellar employees, and then they trained them, and you worked really hard for them. And so that was the trade-off, is, work really hard and you'll get great opportunities. They had a couple of rotational programs, and I was in one of those where they took a handful of MBA students every year, and really grooming middle management. So they wanted you to see a lot of different parts of the business, get to know a lot of people, and really prove yourself at each step. And so I got to see some of the brainstorming events when they saw the next opportunity and who were the teams that were going to go take advantage of those opportunities. And then I got to be on one of those teams. So it was a really great experience. Even though I was only there 5 years, I felt like I got 10 years of experience because you just got to expose to many things.
Yeah, I used to say I was in the early days of Sprint, and then I was employee 55 with Sprint PCS, and Sprint had this was early on, and they had a really, we used to say for every year at Sprint, it's like 3 years at another company, and
Right.
PCS even had a faster pace. But yeah, there's just the learnings. I think, both Sprint, now T-Mobile, as well as Cerner, which got purchased by Oracle. I think that just the amount of talent in Kansas City that have roots to those two companies, and people like yourself and many others that have done some great things. It was because of the training, and you know you're with other smart people moving at fast paces. So yeah, it's done a lot for Kansas City as a community, uh, even though they're not as they're not local anymore, kind of, right? It's T-Mobile is not based here headquarters wise, and obviously Oracle's not. But yeah, it looked like I mean, I don't know when the phrase came into kind of the vogue. It was probably late 90s, I'm going to say. But you were like an intrapreneur. So you were internal to the Cerner, but you were doing kind of leading edge things. Talk about that experience.
When I started Chicago, our first day of class was 9/11, 2001. So coming in, the bubble had burst, but there was still a lot of optimism and a lot of things you can go do. And then it quickly turned into a 2-year job search of, this is a big investment we are making into ourselves. Is there going to be a job at the end of this? So it was a really interesting time to be there. And so I was really lucky to be connected to Cerner. But during that time, I thought, if I don't get a job, I know I want to be an entrepreneur. I was getting one of my minors was in entrepreneurship. And I said, well, I could just go do that now. Um, and I remember a professor turning around, he was facing the board, and they turned around to face us. And he said, but you don't go do this right now. You go get seasoned at a company and get experience, and you go do this in 10, 20 years. And that really dampened my thoughts on that. And then interestingly, fast forward 10 years, and Mark Zuckerberg and, young entrepreneurs had come onto the scene, and perception had changed on that. And they were coaching their MBA students. Well, you can decelerate, add a year, make this a 3-year program, and work on your company too. So it's interesting how that shifted, that
Right.
perception shifted over the years. But I do think there is value in getting seasoned somewhere else. And because I did learn a lot, and you're exactly right. It was the entrepreneurship skills within a larger company, and really good getting into the book of Make Opportunity Happen. A lot of what I learned goes back to how I grew up, what my parents taught me, what Cerner taught me in those 5-year period, and then the Orbis journey. So it was a really exciting place to be at Cerner. One of the risks about entrepreneurship is patience. So if you study where innovation happens, a lot of times larger companies aren't as patient as they need to be, and they set an arbitrary, we'll do this for 2 years or whatever, and then if it hasn't met the goals, they will redistribute the resources back into other places. But was really good training ground to learn the skills to then go become a successful entrepreneur.
Yeah, so talk about that transition. It looks like you left Cerner and founded Orbis Bioscience. Was that how it occurred?
So I left not knowing what I wanted to do. Just knew I needed to go scratch this entrepreneurial itch. And so I went exploring, and Bo Fishback was at Kauffman Foundation at the time, and we were friends from Cerner. And so he was the first door that I knocked on, because I thought he'd probably see some interesting things. And I didn't know it at the time, but he had already incorporated Orbis with Corey Birkland, who was a professor at University of Kansas, and he's the inventor on the technology. So they were putting the pieces into place. They had incorporated, they were working on getting the license out of the University of Illinois. They were working on an angel round. And then when those two things came into place, they needed somebody to run with the ball. And so that's where I came in August of 2008, which is another interesting timing, because I joined them, and then, a couple weeks later, the Lehman Brothers news was in the picture. And I remember thinking I was so fortunate that I had landed someplace, because I thought this is going to be a while, 5 years, 10 years before I would have felt good to make that leap out of Cerner. So timing is everything. And I left at a time where I could still be confident that it was the right decision to do. And I landed at a time that, right before things started to get shaky.
Yeah, I was actually with Capital One in the mortgage division when that all transpired. So I saw the writing on the wall. I didn't know it was going to take down the economy, but we went from 100 different mortgage products and 80% of those second mortgages to 3 mortgage products, all first mortgages. And that was, sometime that May, June timeframe. So it was really interesting to see.
Yeah.
To see. Cerner, obviously, you have all the resources. I mean, you were doing innovative things, kind of startups within a larger corporation. But once you're the president, CEO, and in charge of a company, what was your kind of biggest surprise in your first several months there?
Well, I think the economy was the first biggest surprise of like, whoa, we're not going to be able to raise money again for quite a while. So we need to make this money last as long as possible. For me personally, a big part of that first check went to the lawyers that incorporated us and set everything up, and first payment back to the university. So I was like, oh, wow, it's not as much as, it's not the full amount anymore. So we got to run fast. So that first year, there was the fear of failure that really propelled me personally, because I had left a great job at Cerner. I didn't want that to be a bad decision. So that first year, very active. And when we, at the end of the first year, when we looked back, we had done so much. And we had, I think, 5 contracts in that period. And we had 1 full-time person. So we really took the adrenaline of what the economy was, all the outside noise, and ran as fast as we could, because we knew we had to make something happen quickly, because there was not going to be room for error if we didn't make things happen.
Right. So your whole first year was just you and 1 full-time employee? Is that?
No, I was the full-time employee.
Oh, you were the only one.
I was the full-time employee for first 2.5 years.
Yeah,
and so
wow.
then I would sign a deal, and then I would subcontract with the university, and Corey's lab would do the scientific work. And then one of the big milestones or inflection points in the company's growth was when we got the second person, which was the dedicated scientist. Because before then, there were things not working out. And then once you get a person in there who's also running on their own adrenaline, like, he needs to make this work, then they started working. So that was a great day when he joined us.
So both from your one of your roles in Cerner, as obviously at Orbis, you got to do deals. You got to find partners or customers, clients. Where did you hone, or did you have a mentor, or did you read about, business development?
Partnering is a big theme throughout my career, but it was great training at Cerner to, because a lot of the business development were, finding the first customer. So we had worked on a new product with the state of Tennessee. So that was very much a link arms endeavor. And so that was great practice for that. But I think also how I grew up, partnering is just part of the personality in rural America. So I think that I had great kind of common sense of how you do this, of how you treat people and how you motivate people to want to work with you. And then at Cerner, one of the things that I did was an acquisition that wasn't going so well. So I went in to help lead them into Cerner, integrate cultures, get them on a path that was more sustainable. And that was a lot of partnering. That was more in the life sciences space. So moving into pharma from Cerner, that helped me transition and know that industry and create the thread between these different parts of my career.
Today's podcast is brought to you by Exec HQ, a C-suite fractional firm providing elite executives for your business. If you're having challenges taking your business to the next level, If you want to augment your leadership team or prepare your company for increased growth, profitability, and an eventual successful exit, we have seasoned executives from every C-suite position ensuring a perfect fit for your needs and the dynamics of your industry. You will work with senior leaders who like to roll up their sleeves while checking their egos at the door. They can help your business in specific services such as strategic planning, executive leadership coaching, financial management, corporate governance, marketing, sales management, and many other advisory solutions vital to your business success. That's exechq.com. To learn more, go to exechq.com or email Jeff Palacio at jeff.palacio@exechq.com.
What are your kind of leadership learnings from, being a CEO from that? You were there, basically 12 years and saw the company obviously grow from, just you to a successful sale to a bigger pharma company.
There are so many leadership lessons. Don't even really know where to start, but I think one of the biggest ones is how do you pick yourself up after negative events happen? So I have a section in the book that's called Shit Happens, and how that came to be is we had a board member that had asked some question like, it seems like clients are leaving us. We really need to evaluate what's happening here. And so we went and did a post-mortem and looked at the different reasons why things stopped. And, sometimes the company hits a bad quarter and they have to have layoffs, and your team is part of that. Sometimes your champion gets a better job somewhere else, and then your opportunity goes away. Sometimes there's politics within an organization, and you are associated with the losing end of some, so there's lots of reasons on those. But those are frustrating because they're not reflective of the work that you're doing. So if the work that you're doing is positive and you're meeting your milestones and you should be able to proceed, but then you can't proceed because of one of these other gut punches is what I would call it. And it seems like everything falls down, then picking everything back up and going. So I think there's a fine line between too much focus and not enough. So you need enough balls in the air. When something drops, you have enough that you can keep going. You can't have too many balls in the air that nothing ever gets accomplished and nothing ever crosses a finish line. So in those moments where a major deal stopped or partnership stopped, how do you rally yourself first and then rally your team to keep going is what I think is the most profound leadership learning, because it's very long. And I say, a cat has 9 lives. I felt like I was on my 15th life of, always picking yourself up after something bad happens.
Obviously, you're helping other entrepreneurs in their journey, both with your consulting company, and then your book got published, Making Opportunity Happen, The Entrepreneurial's Guide to Align Your Own Stars. So that just got published. We're here recording on May 13th. It was about 3 weeks ago, give or take. Obviously, you want to give back, and that's what you're doing consulting wise, but did you always have a book in mind that I'm going to be an author?
No, I just found myself repeating the same stories. And, a book is a way to scale yourself you don't have to keep telling the same stories if you can refer to section 24. And I was using other people's books as tools. I say, go get this book and look at chapter 4 and do this exercise. So that's where I had a vision for a tool to help people that had a bunch of small sections and then a starting point of how they would use it. And that's where the templates come into play of kind of like a cookbook. How do I make this right now? And then I want to evolve it to more my taste. So maybe more salt, less salt, whatever. So I think being an entrepreneur can be confusing. There's so many paths and so many voices. So how to help people get a kind of a quick start on some of these things, but then also allow flexibility. There's not one right path. But what I do know is when you give people too many options, then they just stop. So how do you give them a starting point, and then but then also flexibility, like it's your journey, and evolve it how you want to evolve it.
I have not read the book yet. It looks fascinating. And I did go see the templates, and then I saw, oh yeah, there's 40 of them. And they're pretty in depth. I mean, they look really good. I mean, is there one or two templates that has helped you the most, or the people you help? Does it seem to be a common thread for those? Obviously, they're all worthwhile, else you wouldn't have put them out there. But any thoughts on that?
Well, the point I have referenced the most when there's a friends help section of how do you get people to help you? How do you get your friends to help you? And the key is to make it as easy as possible for them to help you. And there's a concept called affordable email that you have ready. So then I run into you, you say, oh, you should know my friend Phil. And I can go back really quickly and send it to you while it's fresh in your memory. And then when you get it, you can add a sentence or two and send it on to Phil. You're more likely that that's going to happen if you set yourself up to make it as easy as possible for the person that's helping you. So that's my most referenced section so far. But I think really the core section, if there was just one of these, I'm calling them methods, one method, it would be around urgency, because I think that's one of the things we did well of. How do you build urgency for yourself, for your team, for your partners, for your customers, so that you are making the opportunity happen and not just sitting there waiting. And that's how the stars, aligning your own stars. When you look at some of these headlines that are, really successful companies and successful products, their stars just didn't line up. They worked really hard to align those stars. And so these are the methods that worked for us to align our stars, is how the book came to be.
I've interviewed many entrepreneurs on the podcast, and I've never asked this question. What is your definition of an entrepreneur? Like, I had Rick Colley on the episode that just got published. Rick, longtime insurance managing partner at Lockton, then he got involved in the entrepreneurial space. And he said, well, you're not really an entrepreneur until you have to make payroll. But I'm just curious what your definition is.
Well, and I love that question. And I would ask that question to potential candidates when they would come on to our team of like, what does an entrepreneur mean to you? Because we all were, when, it's a small team and we all needed the entrepreneurial mindset. So if they would say something like, I want to make a lot of money, then I would know, oh, maybe not the best fit, because it's really going to be a hard grind. And you might never see a lot of money. So to me, it's more about, an entrepreneur is someone who sees an opportunity and has to make that change. They are the people to make that change into a new world. And so you're painting a vision of a new world that a lot of times others can't see yet. And you have to be really scrappy to help people to see that and to make progress, so that the vision becomes more clear for others to join you.
One of your chapters is managing overwhelm. And I think this, whether you're an entrepreneur or just, a busy corporate leader, we all experience it. But explain a little bit about that. And from your own, when I look at you obviously you just published your books, so you're doing things around that. You have your own consulting company. You've co-founded Digital Health KC. You're on several boards, BioNexus and Attentive Science, I believe. You're a venture partner, Springtide Ventures. So you have children, your mother. So you got the balance of the personal life. So how do you manage overwhelm? And I'm sure that translated into the chapter a little bit too, as well as your experiences with people you have helped.
In the book, one of my core drivers was to make people know that they're not alone, and there are a lot of people that feel like this. So I think overwhelm is one of the most common words that entrepreneurs will use when they get together in their safe circles. And because there's so many things to do, so many needs, and so little resources. So how are you going to do that? And that's where, some of the accountability sections are really important of honing in on what is the most important thing right now and what do you need to do for that, and kind of letting the noise stay outside, but really focusing in that. And that, the book mindset is interwoven into, there's four main pillars. It's about execution, your support system, adapting, and perseverance. And I originally had a fifth, which was mindset, but I couldn't figure out where to place it. Do I place it in the beginning? Well, some of these are about perseverance, so that seemed a little bit off. I put it at the end, but then it was too late. So really the mindset is two sections of each of those four, because it's really interwoven. And one of the things in early feedback is, because it's a business book, but then there's also this mindset, almost like self-help element. And typically those are two different kinds of books. But I think the mindset aspect is so important in how you execute and how you adapt and how you persevere and how you think about support, that it is critical. So a lot of in that overwhelm is relying on those voices that you have and the mindset to adjust, but then also your processes. So you almost become robotic of, well, this is what I do next, because I know these are my top 3 actions for this week. So I'm going to go do that.
One of the reviews I read about the book, and I think this is a big compliment to you, is a lot of startups use the EOS, Entrepreneur Operating System, which is, it's a very good framework. But this review said this is so much more powerful. Were you familiar with EOS, and what are your thoughts in terms of what you put together versus kind of the EOS?
EOS and the book Traction, a great resource. I see this as earlier stage. Doesn't matter what your process looks like if you don't have a product that anybody wants. So,
Right.
I would see Make Opportunity Happen be a book that you would use. And then as things start clicking, then EOS and Traction makes sense a little bit later. Some of the parallels that I like is, EOS with some of the words that they use, like rocks. When you are a part of that tribe and you all use those words, you can say this word and you know exactly what I mean. And Jim Collins' Good to Great book from 20 years ago, I think, was an excellent one of those where we could say BHAG and, I've just met you on the street, but you know exactly what I mean, or right seat on the right bus.
Yeah.
And so that's my hope, is that some of these words or phrases or concepts, that the book gets out there enough, and the BHAG is a really important concept, and I say it, and we're on the same page. We know what that means.
So Maria, you wrote the book obviously for entrepreneurs, but does it have any application for people in like kind of corporate America? Especially the Cerners of the world, or the T-Mobiles, or what's your thoughts on that?
Great question. I presented at a conference last week, and it was a group of not-for-profits, and I reflected on what they needed to get out of that hour, and what Make Opportunity Happen could give them. And really, a lot of the places I would just interchange the word entrepreneur for leader, because everybody needs to make progress towards their goals, and particularly the kind of training that you get as an entrepreneur is very useful in large companies and not-for-profits. And really, that's where, with Digital Health KC and in BioNexus KC, I had been on the board of BioNexus KC for quite a few years, but that's where I felt like the entrepreneur could really help drive this. So I think that everybody's an entrepreneur. It's just maybe we don't use that title, but if you want to make progress towards your goals, there's a lot in this book for you. Now, say the funding section, that might not be as relevant, because you might not need to go get angel funding or venture capital or grants. And that's why the book is set up in it how it is, so that you can kind of jump of like, okay, this is the section I need. I don't need this one, or I need this in a year. So I think particularly the accountability, the urgency, the mindset, your support system, I don't care who you are, the more friends you have, the better your career is going to be. And so having different ways to think about these things are important. And particularly as a leader, when you need people on your team to get things done. So I can see them saying, hey, so maybe the forwardable email isn't for getting investment, but it could be for business development or anything else, that you need somebody to introduce you to somebody. So I can see how people would morph these, and it can be the book can be a tool to train your team to put structures into place to help them to be accountable and get things done.
I was thinking that, and when you said that that template, about the email, I immediately went there. I'm like, I got to download that template just to check it out, because it is important, and it's all about connections and relationships, and how you can add value to as many people as possible. Do you see more people coming into the entrepreneurial space because post COVID, it's a kind of a different corporate environment. And what I see is there's a lot of kind of, there's 10,000 people a day that turn 65, and there's, the average age of a baby boomer is 58. But I see a lot of these people that maybe don't want to be in corporate America anymore, but they still want to add value. They still want to contribute, or they have an idea. Does your book kind of help them? Because it's hard, as you know, when you're at Cerner or XYZ company, and you have the salary and you have the benefits, you have the 35% annual bonus targets, you have stock options. I mean, and you have a big title, but I mean, when you start your own company, it's so different. Like, you're just another great person out there that's done great things, and you're smart, but you're not in a safe and structure anymore. Do you have any thoughts of how that your book can it help that person, or how does that older demographic person navigate the entrepreneurial space?
One of the innovators that I work with talks about it as going into a foreign country, where you go to a restaurant and you need to eat, you need to order something, but you can't read the menu. You need help translating what these new words mean. And so that's where I hope that the book is very digestible, short sections of, I need to form a board of directors. What does that mean? And how do I think about that? Because what I was doing as a coach, I would, somebody needed to work on their board, and I would say, here's the book on that. And then I'd realize they don't have time to read that whole book, but they have time for 5 pages. And then can I help give them a little nudge to incorporate, how are they going to think about it for themselves? That's what the template is for. So I think that's a really great way to think about it, is everybody brings a lot of expertise into the world. But if you haven't been in an entrepreneurial environment and been a founder, that's new territory. And so how do you find someone that can help translate this foreign language, this new world that you've just entered? And so that's what I hope that the book does, but that's also where mentors are really helpful. So now that I've launched a book and it's out there 3 weeks, who's a year and a half to 2 years ahead of me that I can call, and hopefully I can give them value too. But they've just been through this journey that I want to walk, and what can I learn from them and to go faster? And so books and videos, also the one-on-one, who you can talk with, little nuggets that they've learned, that's so valuable.
In your book, you mentioned earlier, it's kind of 4 sections or 4 methods or methodologies: execution, support, adaptability, perseverance. I'm very interested in the support side, because, everyone says being an entrepreneur is a lonely journey. I think it's even in your bio or LinkedIn profile. I mean, so what's the support piece about? Because it's so, you have a spouse or partner, and you have family. Talk about that.
Yes. And, you have to have your eyes wide open of the gut punches are going to come down, and they're going to happen to you. So what is the structure that will help you keep going? And so to me, support structure is internal. What do you tell yourself? What mindsets do you have to help you? And then obviously external. So it's your team, it's your mentors, it's your advisors, it can be your consultants, it's your tribe of friends that are going through things similar to you. So it's a very broad subject of what is the support that you want around you that can help you stand back up or stay up, but also can ask hard questions, can give you tips that you can go faster, and that you can be a part of their story too. So that's one of the most exciting things when I think about over my career is if I made an introduction and something really great happened, I took a lot of pride in I was part of that story. And I think that's one of the great things about linking arms with many people is that we get to share each other's stories and be a part in it. And, even with the book launch, I hope a lot of people see their fingerprints on it and they take some ownership that this is their book too. So you can do that in a lot of different ways of making what you're doing important for other people. And then you get a lot of help.
Talk about your writing process. Obviously, this is your first book you've published. We met in March of 2023. I can't remember if you had started the book at that time because I know it was maybe the beginning. But talk about your writing process.
Yeah, it took me about 2 years. And at first I was just writing these things down so it wouldn't circle in my mind. And then so I had this notebook and then I was like, oh, I think there could be a book here, but how does it flesh out? It was like a puzzle. I was moving the pieces around of like, what should this look like? And then I joined a group called Scribe Media, and they have a lot of resources on the web of, put together a process. And there's a famous author, his book is The War of Art. And, he says, inspiration always hits at 9 o'clock every day. So it's about discipline of doing it every day, because unless you've been writing all your life, as writing a book, we all write, but really working on a project like this can be daunting. And so it's just getting, like anything, getting a discipline of at 8 o'clock every day, I'm going to write for an hour. And then 2 years really isn't that long. It's, it was long, but a lot of people, when you listen to their stories, they're working on for 6 years or 8 years. And I just don't think I could have handled that. Getting the discipline, getting the people, the editors and the people that could help with the process, which is one of, in the creating urgency chapter, whenever you spend money, you're more motivated to get it done because you've spent money. Whenever somebody else is relying on you to get your piece so that they can do their piece, you're more likely that it's going to get done.
Actually, Mackie Musavi gave me the push to finally read The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield, who I love. And how I love, one of my favorite books, it's a fiction book that he wrote, The Legend of Bagger Vance, became a movie with Will Smith. And I did the same thing for my podcast. I knew I just had to do it. And I made a commitment. I am going to publish an episode every week. And I've been doing so since January of 2023. So it's just the work, just doing it, because if you wait for inspiration to hit,
right,
you're going to wait a long time. So I totally I love that process. And the book's available on Amazon and major platforms, your website, I'm sure, which we'll put a link
right
to.
Now, just Amazon, and we'll see how that grows. I think 80-90% of books are sold through Amazon, so I'm focusing there.
Yeah, I love it. And we'll put a link to the book in the podcast episode notes. Maria, I love to help two groups of people with this podcast, with great leaders like yourself giving advice, but one's that recent college graduate. So we're right here in May of 2024. Seniors are graduating. What advice would you have for them to begin their career journey? Most of them are going to get their first professional job. What would you say to them?
I've been thinking a lot about that group lately since I've launched the book. My avatar for the book was a combination of people that I had worked with. So it wasn't necessarily right out of college, but now that I've been thinking about it, entrepreneurship is something that's always available to you. So if you go start this first job and you're not going to be doing this for the rest of your life, it's okay. Get your foundation, get your first steps, and start to, in your free time, read or look at what other people are doing and start to knit together the pieces of things you like in other people's journeys that you want to have in your journey. Sometimes we would have people that would come join us at Orbis, and I would say, oh, I know what the problem is. You haven't worked any place crappy yet, So sometimes you need these experiences to propel you to other experiences. And, maybe your first job out of college is fabulous and that's wonderful, but a lot of times it's not the thing that you want to do forever. It's a stepping stone. And how do you start to construct what the next steps are going to look like?
you talked about getting your first job, and internet was just coming, popular, but you still had to go to the library, you still wrote and mailed, letters to companies. But I think the beauty of today is for the generation coming out of college and young people in their 20s and early 30s, there's just so many ways to learn today, as well as there's so many opportunities to do things for income outside of a corporate job, a company, working for a W-2 employee. So I think that is important. The next group I'd love to help is everybody can be a leader, whether they have direct reports or not. But once you actually get that promotion from an individual contributor and now are responsible for a team of people and now are beginning your leadership journey, what advice would you have for them in terms of becoming a great leader over time?
In the book, there's a section on the golden rule to treat people the way you want to be treated. And whenever things got tough and I had to have a hard conversation or let someone go or go through something difficult, whenever I would really lean into that, treat people the way you want to be treated, the next steps would become clear. So for me, that is the cornerstone of a culture, and you are creating a mini culture with your team within a broader culture. That's one of the great things when you have that kind of responsibility, you can start to bring in the things that you want in and leave out the things that you don't really need to have that as a cornerstone too, to help guide you of what's the right actions and the right words, the right steps to take.
Maria, thank you so much for coming on the Corporate Couch today. I love the book. I can't wait to read it, and I'm definitely downloaded some templates because it definitely will help me. So thanks for coming on the Corporate Couch today.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to be here.
You just have to love Maria Flynn's career journey. And she's so smart. I mean, civil engineering degree at K-State, goes right to a master's in environmental engineering at some school called Stanford University. Mm-hmm. Pretty good school, I think. Works in an engineering firm after that in environmental engineering, and then says, oh, I'm going to go to University of Chicago Booth School, get my MBA. And my first day of classes is 9/11, the 9/11, 2001. So just, what a early career.
Those are heavy degrees,
Yeah.
Those are big
very
time
heavy
stuff.
Yeah. As they used to say in the old days, she has more degrees than a thermometer.
Yeah.
Wheat farm in Kansas. Her parents were entrepreneurs in that space. Imparted her with many lessons. If you can see it, you can be it, which I thought was phenomenal for parents to impart that kind of advice. But then, after the Booth School, she gets a job at Cerner, and just like a past guest, Kevin McGinnis, did with Sprint/T-Mobile, at Cerner, she became an intrapreneur. So she was that entrepreneur within a big corporation doing non-traditional things. And she had a meteoric rise, for 4.5 years, which is not a long tenure, leading a $5 million business unit, which, started from $0. Then she becomes CEO of Orbis Biosciences. She moved fast. And I really loved her leadership lessons. She had many, but one of them I really liked was, hey, in a time of stress, you got to rally yourself first, then your team. It's kind of putting that your airbag on first, and then, the person sitting next to you type thing, a child or whatever. And then her book is so good in terms of, for entrepreneurs. And I said, why'd you write a book? Did you have a book in you? Was that a goal? She goes, no, I just kept telling the same stories over and over again. So I thought, I'll write a book. And, as I've told many of my friends that have written books, they always say, well, I'm not making much in royalties. And I always say, well, it's the Rolls Royce of business cards though, when you have a book. And what I love about it, she has 40 in-depth templates that you can download. Go to makingithappen.org or whatever her website is for her book. And there's 40 really in-depth templates that anybody can use. So, Yeah, I just thought Maria's great. I'm so glad Dr. Michelle Robin introduced us.
She was a fascinating interview, and really indicative of the caliber of interviews that you have on the corporate couch here, and also the variety. If you think back on last week, remember that we talked to Glenn Fisher last week, and his big deal was he's also one of these serial entrepreneurs, but he made a comment that said, why in the world would somebody get a degree in entrepreneurship from college? Why do you go to college to study entrepreneurship? Just go out and do it. And then the very next interview that you have is Maria, and she gets a degree with a minor in entrepreneurship. And so this is sort of an indication of the variety of people and the variety of interviews that you get from people that visit the corporate couch. You get a little bit of everything from here. You get all of the different perspectives. And, every one of them is right in their own way, even when they don't agree with each other. They're right. They are perfect for the person providing that interview. They're exactly the kind of advice that they need to give at that moment in time. And it may be the exact kind of advice that you need at your moment in time also. But if you don't agree with it, just listen to the next episode, because there's going to be somebody else just as interesting.
Now we're close to, 95 interviews. And I would say not only shows there's no linear career path, there's so many squiggly lines of career
There's
paths.
so
There's
many
no
different
one
ways.
right. It's a unique journey. So that's what I try to impart on, people beginning their career right out of college or a couple of years in, that they ask for my advice. I said, you got to follow your own path. And, your parents have a different path. Your uncle has a different path. Your brother has a different path. Just follow your path.
And you and I have different paths. We have different paths from each other, and we have different paths from about every one of our listeners too. So
100%.
It's just interesting.
And Joe, I know you're going to have some great words of wisdom
Yes.
based on Maria's episode.
We are going to that great philosopher named Stephen Wright again. Stephen once said, "The early bird may get the worm, but the second mouse gets the cheese."
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of The Corporate Couch. If you enjoy the podcast, I would love for you to take 2 minutes out of your day to rate us 5 stars and write a review. Please join me next week to learn from another great leader sharing their professional journey and insights.